For over 50 years, a grainy image has haunted the Justice Department's files. In it, the cabin door of a Douglas DC-8 stationed in Miami cracks open just enough for an FBI agent, stripped down to an undershirt and swim trunks, to edge forward with a heavy suitcase in hand. Inside that bag is $1 million, packed with cartons of cigarettes, apples, and even some ham and cheese sandwiches. Shortly after the picture was taken, the suitcase was dangled from a rope and tugged up into the plane by a man disguised as a priest and holding a gun. This was the largest ransom ever paid in a hijacking at the time. One by one, passengers were allowed to descend, but the flight crew stayed behind, held captive as the hijackers prepared for the next phase of their plan. Their eyes set across the Atlantic, ready to embark on one of the most successful escapes the FBI has ever witnessed. By 1976, 4 years after the incident, 4 out of the 5 hijackers had been captured by French authorities. Yet, despite America's pursuit, they never set foot on U.S. soil again, safeguarded from extradition by local laws. The 5th hijacker, George Wright, vanished without a trace. For decades, he remained a ghost, slipping through the grasp of both American and international authorities. The search spanned continents, a relentless pursuit that led nowhere for decades. Then, in 2011, the small, sun-soaked community of Casas Novas near Lisbon was rocked by a sudden revelation. A quiet neighbor, known by some as Jorge the Painter, was taken into custody. His real identity was not José Luis Jorge Santos, as his papers claimed, but George Wright, the long-lost fugitive the FBI had been hunting for nearly 40 years. It took only a fingerprint from his identity card to reveal the truth. The man who had lived as a devoted family man, blending into a suburban Portuguese town for years, was, in reality, one of the most elusive hijackers of all time. And he had finally been caught. Years had passed since Wright's notorious escapade first made international headlines. For many, the memory of the incident faded alongside the photograph of the ransom money being delivered to the hijackers. But with Wright's sudden capture, the world was jolted back to the dark reality of his twisted story, uncovering just how strange and audacious this tale had truly been. The DC-8 hijacking might have been Wright's boldest strike, but it was far from his first. As a teenager in the early 1960s, Wright ran with a group pulling off robberies across New Jersey. But things took a dark turn during an attempted heist at a Farmingdale gas station. When the robbery didn't go as planned, Wright and an accomplice opened fire, fatally wounding a World War II veteran at the scene. Captured shortly after, Wright was sentenced to 15 to 30 years behind bars. Yet prison couldn't hold him. In 1970, Wright orchestrated a daring escape from Bayside State Prison, reportedly stealing the warden's car to make his getaway before authorities could stop him. Wright started a new life in Detroit. According to some reports, he made a living working at fast food restaurants and as a part-time model. But this simple life would soon prove unfulfilling for Wright's rebellious spirit. After joining the Black Liberation Army, Wright moved in with 4 other members, his housemates unaware of his dark criminal past. The true nature of Wright's life inside that house remains a mystery. All we know comes from a reporter who visited the residence shortly after the hijacking. What he found was chilling. A makeshift altar adorned with headstones, charred and mutilated dolls, and black plastic pigs. Many speculations were made, but the true purpose of these bizarre objects is still unclear. As for the plan to hijack the plane, its origins are shrouded in secrecy. The surviving members have refused to reveal details, but it has been suggested that the idea took root after Detroit police shot George Brown, one of their own, as he returned home from the movies, an encounter that nearly cost him his life. In a recent interview, Melvin McNair, one of the members, said, "We felt cornered. We had to do something." And so, the decision was made. The group would leave the country, but not before getting their payback. The first step was finding the perfect aircraft for their mission. They needed a plane with no access from below, no way for the FBI to launch a surprise attack and derail their plan. After weeks of careful research, they locked in their target, a DC-8 bound for Miami. On July 31st, 1972, the 5 members of the Detroit House, 3 men and 2 women, boarded Delta Airlines Flight 841. They dressed for their roles: Brown as a college student, McNair as a businessman, and Wright as a priest. Captain William H. May, unaware of what awaited him, saw Wright boarding. He remembers thinking, a priest. Maybe there's one we can trust. As the plane flew over Georgia, Wright caught the attention of a flight attendant, motioning her closer. Just as she leaned in, he opened a hollowed-out Bible he had brought with him, revealing a gun inside. With calm but firm commands, he ordered her to take him to the cockpit. McNair joined Wright at the front, drawing his own weapon on the crew. Captain May and the flight attendant had no choice but to comply. Captain May sent a message to Miami's air traffic control. The voice on the other end asked a single question. "Are you squawking 7500? May responded with a simple affirmative. It was the code for a hijacking. Shortly after, the plane landed on an abandoned runway at Miami International Airport. But as soon as the wheels touched down, May turned to Wright and issued a warning. "You know this airplane won't make it all the way to Algeria. It doesn't have the fuel range. We'll go down in the ocean." At that moment, it dawned on Wright that they had seized a plane built solely for domestic flights. But they were in too deep, and there was no turning back. The plane sat on the Miami tarmac, surrounded by agents, as Wright and his accomplices demanded a $1 million ransom. An amount was inspired by Brown's intended lawsuit against Detroit after the police shooting. The FBI's hands were tied. Storming the plane wasn't viable, and risking the lives of the crew and passengers was out of the question. With time running out, Wright issued an ultimatum. If the money didn't arrive soon, he'd start taking out hostages. Scrambling to comply, the First National Bank of Miami gathered the ransom in $50 and $100 bills, handing it to 2 FBI agents tasked with delivering it directly to the hijackers. But Wright didn't trust the agents. He initially ordered them to approach the plane naked to ensure they weren't carrying weapons. After tense negotiations, he agreed they could wear only swim trunks and undershirts as they came up to the aircraft. A surreal image that remains one of the FBI's most bizarre operations to this day. Once the money was in hand, the hijackers released the passengers, but the crew wasn't so lucky. The journey was far from over for them. With low fuel reserves, Captain May made a stop in Boston, where the plane was refueled, and an experienced international navigator joined to guide them on their ultimate leg to Algiers. As the DC-8 ascended from Boston, the hijackers peered out the windows, taking one last look at the lights below. This was it, their final view of their homeland. When the plane touched down in Algiers, it was immediately surrounded by soldiers. After spotting the hijackers, an Algerian official approached, giving them a warm welcome to their new home. At that time, Algeria was a haven for Black Panthers escaping persecution in America, and Wright's group hoped this country would bring them freedom from their constant hunt. But reality quickly shattered that hope. As U.S.-Algerian relations warmed, Algerian authorities forced the group to surrender the $1 million ransom they had secured in Miami. For the next year, the hijackers were confined to a suburban compound, constantly under the watch of agents they couldn't identify. Instead of liberation, they found themselves in a gilded cage. Disillusioned, McNair and Brown, along with their spouses, forged an escape to Paris on fake passports, aided by international human rights associations. French authorities eventually captured and tried them, but McNair and Brown ultimately dodged extradition to the U.S., emerging as free men in the early 1980s. Wright, however, chose to go solo, Upon reaching France, he parted ways with the group, keeping his final destination a secret. For decades, he lived a quiet life near Lisbon, until his dramatic arrest in 2011. The US demanded Wright's extradition to complete the murder sentence he was serving time for when he escaped prison in the 70s, but Portuguese courts refused, deeming him a rehabilitated citizen. And so, 50 years after one of the most bizarre ransom exchanges in FBI history, the group responsible walks free across the Atlantic, looking back on their audacious hijacking as a wild chapter of their youth. According to an official, the US Justice Department is neither actively pursuing the case nor willing to abandon it.